I need to write this down. I don't know if it's for my own sanity or as some kind of warning. Maybe both. Typing helps ground me, makes the shaking in my hands a little less noticeable. The doctors keep telling me I'm experiencing a psychotic break, but the puncture wounds on my back and the darkening birthmark on my palm tell a different story. My dad turned 63 yesterday. We always throw him a party at his house. The same house I grew up in. It's tradition. This year something changed, something that had been waiting precisely 63 years. Family traditions are just rituals we don't question. That's what Dad always said whenever I asked why we had to keep doing the same things year after year. His eyes would always drift away when he said it, like he was remembering something he'd rather forget. Dad wasn't always this cryptic. Before Mom vanished, he was different, warmer, more present. We used to fish together on weekends, his calloused hands patiently untangling my line when I'd snarl it. Those hands would tremble slightly whenever his birthday approached, though I didn't understand why until now. After Mom disappeared, fishing stopped. The only constant that remained was his insistence on the birthday ritual. Always on the exact day, never postponed, never altered. Even when I was finishing my master's thesis, even when he was recovering from pneumonia 3 years ago, the party had to happen, exactly as it always had. The house itself sits back from a road, nestled in about 5 acres of dense woods, lush and green in the spring, blazing with color in the fall, but somehow always holding shadows deeper than they should be. After Mom vanished, I'd sometimes catch Dad staring out at those woods at dusk, whispering something under his breath. Once, I crept close enough to hear him counting backward from 63. When I'd ask what he was doing, he'd just say, "Keeping track of what's mine." I thought he meant the property. Dad's lived alone since Mom passed 10 years ago. At least, that's what we tell people. The truth about Mom's disappearance is something Dad and I never discuss. Just like we never discuss the strange, hourglass-shaped birthmark we both share on our left palms, or the fact that neither of us can remember anything about the night she vanished except the smell of ozone and damp earth. And the sound, like wet leather being stretched over wooden frames. Sometimes I still hear it in my dreams, that sound, followed by Mom's scream cutting abruptly to silence. The police found one of Mom's shoes by the edge of the woods. Just one. It was perfectly clean despite the mud all around it. When they brought cadaver dogs, the animals refused to enter the tree line, whimpering and backing away. One dog, a German shepherd with an impeccable record, bit his handler when the man tried to force him forward. The search was called off after 3 days. Dad never cried, not once. He just sat in his armchair, rubbing that hourglass mark, staring at nothing. Dad's a creature of habit, and the birthday party is one of the few constants he clings to. Same small group of friends, mostly colleagues from the dusty archives where he worked before retiring. Same Jell-O salad recipe Mom used to make. Same slightly off-key rendition of Happy Birthday. I always thought Dad was just honoring Mom's memory with these parties. The familiarity seemed to comfort him. Now, I understand it was never celebration. It was obligation. Last week, I called Dad to confirm party details. The conversation was ordinary until I mentioned bringing my new girlfriend, Eliza. "No," he said sharply, a panic in his voice I'd never heard before. "No new people. Not this year." "Why not? Is everything okay?" His breathing was heavy on the line. "This is a difficult one, son. The 63rd. Best to keep it traditional." "What's special about 63? I asked. The silence stretched so long I thought we'd been disconnected. Then, so quietly I almost missed it, he said, "That's how many they need." When I pressed him, he changed the subject, voice resuming its normal cadence, as if the moment of strangeness had never happened. "I didn't invite Eliza. I got there around 6 p.m. on the day of the party. The gravel crunched under my tires, like usual, but something felt different. The trees seemed to bend inward, watching, listening. Strings of faded party lights were draped across the porch railings, buzzing with an unnatural persistence, like insects speaking in code. When I killed the engine, the silence that rushed in felt hungry. Before going inside, I noticed something odd. The wind chimes Mom had hung years ago were perfectly still. Despite the breeze, I could feel on my skin. I touched one. It was ice cold and made no sound, as if it were frozen in time or existing in some different medium than the air around it. Inside, the usual suspects were already mingling. Mr. Henderson, Dad's old boss, looking even more like a bewildered owl than usual. Mrs. Gable from next door, clutching her ubiquitous Tupperware container. A few others whose names always escape me, but whose faces are etched into the memory of dozens of these parties. As I shook hands with each guest, I realized something that sent ice through my veins. Each year they look exactly the same. Not just similar, but identical. I realized with a chill that Mrs. Gable's dress was the exact same one she'd worn to every birthday since I was 15. The small coffee stain on the left sleeve hadn't changed, hadn't faded. It was precisely the same stain. The amber necklace she wore caught the light in the same way, reflecting the same pattern on her collarbone. For a decade, she hadn't aged a day. Dad seemed fine at first, maybe a little tired, but he greeted me with his usual warm hug, smelling faintly of pipe tobacco and old paper. He was wearing the slightly too loud Hawaiian shirt I got him last year. Everything felt normal. The low murmur of conversation, the clinking of ice in glasses, the smell of roast beef warming in the oven. But beneath it all was something wrong. A discord, like music played at the wrong speed. When Dad hugged me, his arms held on a beat too long, his fingers pressing into the spot where my spine meets my neck, as if counting the vertebrae. I pulled away, and for a second, just a flash. His eyes seemed completely black before returning to their familiar hazel. The first crack in the facade was small. I was getting a drink in the kitchen when Mr. Henderson came up beside me. He didn't say hello, just leaned slightly toward the refrigerator, his eyes fixed on the magnets holding up my childhood drawings. I noticed with unease that one drawing, a crayon scribble I'd made at age 6, depicted tall, thin figures standing in a circle around a smaller figure. I didn't remember drawing it. The crayon marks seemed to shimmer slightly, as if freshly applied. "The cycle nears completion," he whispered, his voice dry like rustling leaves. "Your father has served well, but the vessel weakens." I forced a laugh, my throat suddenly tight. "What cycle's that, Mr. Henderson? Getting Dad another year older?" He didn't smile. He just slowly turned his head, his owlish eyes seeming too large behind his thick glasses, pupils contracting to pinpricks despite the dim light. The lineage must continue. The hunger must be fed. A memory surfaced. I was 7, hiding in the hallway past my bedtime, watching Dad and Mr. Henderson bent over old maps spread across the dining table. "The confluence occurs every 63 years, Henderson had said. "That's when the door thins. That's when payment is easiest." Dad had nodded gravely, his finger tracing something on the map I couldn't see. In the memory, Henderson had turned suddenly, looking directly at my hiding place, though I was certain I'd been silent. "The boy already shows the mark," he'd said. "Stronger than yours was at his age." Dad had glanced up, his face drawn with a sorrow I couldn't comprehend then. "He won't bear it," Dad had answered firmly. "I'll find another way." Now Henderson straightened up, grabbed a napkin, and walked back into the living room as if nothing had happened. But not before I caught the faintest flicker of something insectal moving beneath the skin of his neck. I reached for my phone to call someone who, I wasn't sure, when I noticed the childhood drawings on the fridge were different. Where had been stick figures and houses, now showed dark, spindly shapes with too many limbs. One showed a crude black candle with a purple flame. Another showed an hourglass with what looked like a tiny figure trapped in each bulb, their mouths open in silent screams. I glanced at my palm, where the hourglass mark seemed darker than usual. I've had it since birth. Dad told me once it meant I was a keeper of time. Mom didn't have one. I remember asking her why when I was small, and she'd looked at Dad with such sadness before answering. "Because I'm not part of the line, sweetheart. I'm just a visitor." Then she'd hug me so tightly it hurt, whispering into my hair, "But I'd rewrite time itself to keep you safe." Mrs. Gable, setting down her Jell-O salad, lime green as always, caught my eye and gave me this wide, unblinking stare. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. It felt stretched, painted on. She held my gaze for an uncomfortably long moment before turning away with a jerky movement that reminded me of stop-motion animation. The jello didn't wobble as she set it down. It remained perfectly still, as if frozen solid, or as if the laws of physics simply didn't apply to it. As more guests arrived, the same faces Dad had known for decades, the atmosphere grew heavier, charged with something I couldn't name. They greeted Dad with a strange formality, their handshakes lingering, their fingers tracing the hourglass mark on his palm. Their eyes scanned him up and down with an unnerving intensity, like butchers assessing a prime cut. They barely spoke to each other, arranging themselves around the living room in a loose semicircle facing the armchair, where Dad usually sat to open presents. They just stood there, waiting. "Dad," I whispered, catching him alone by the hallway. "Something's wrong. These people." "Not people," he corrected quietly, his eyes darting around the room. For a moment, he looked terrified. "Never were. I'm sorry, son. I tried to keep you away from all this. Your mother and I both did." She thought if he stopped abruptly as Mrs. Gable approached. "It's time for cake, Arthur," she trilled, her voice hitting notes that made my teeth ache. Dad nodded, defeated. Yes, time for cake. The usual cheerful chatter died down. The only sounds were the buzz of the porch lights and the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. A clock I suddenly realized I hadn't heard chime all evening. Looking closer, I saw the hands weren't moving. Hadn't moved for years, based on the dust accumulated on them. Yet the ticking continued, growing louder, more insistent, like a heartbeat accelerating with fear. Dad, caught in the center of their silent attention, started looking uncomfortable. He shifted in his chair, tugging at the collar of his Hawaiian shirt. "Well," he said, his voice a little too loud in the quiet room. "Anyone want to hear about the new bird feeder I put up?" Nobody responded. Their eyes remained fixed on him. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat softly. "Arthur," he said, his voice regaining the dry, papery quality. "It is time." Dad swallowed hard. He looked at me, a flicker of something, horror, resignation, relief in his eyes. But then it was gone, replaced by a weary acceptance that was somehow more frightening than fear. He nodded slowly. Yes, I suppose it is." He glanced at me. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I thought I could spare you this. I tried to break the cycle when your mother—" His voice trailed off. A memory hit me like a physical blow. Mom and Dad arguing the night before her disappearance. Mom's voice rising hysterically. "I won't let them have him. You promised we could end this." Dad's response eerily calm. "There's no ending it, only continuing or transferring. That was the bargain." Mom had slammed her palm against the wall. "Your grandfather's bargain, not yours. Not our son's." Dad's face had hardened. "Do you think I wouldn't break it if I could? The door must have a keeper. If not me, then let it be me," Mom had said, her voice suddenly quiet, resolved. "I found another way." This wasn't part of the birthday tradition. Or maybe it was the only true tradition, hidden beneath the veneer of normal celebration all these years. Mrs. Gable stepped forward, carrying not her Jell-O salad, but a small, ornate wooden box I'd never seen before. No, that wasn't true. I had seen it once in the attic when I was 7. Dad had caught me looking at it and forbidden me from ever going into the attic again. The box was carved with symbols that hurt my eyes to look at directly, patterns that seemed to shift and change when viewed peripherally. She placed it on the coffee table in front of Dad. The other guests leaned in slightly, a collective intake of breath that sounded like wind through dry reeds. "What's going on, Dad?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. "What is this?" He wouldn't look at me. Just part of getting older, son. Some things you have to accept." He rubbed his hourglass birthmark absently. "Some bargains can't be broken." I felt a sudden stabbing pain in my own palm. Looked down to see my birthmark darkening, the edges growing more defined, throbbing in time with my racing heart. Black veins began spiderwebbing outward from it, disappearing beneath my sleeve. The pain was sharp, electric, climbing up my arm like invasive vines. Mr. Henderson gestured towards the box. "Open it, Arthur. Fulfill the pact. Begin the transition. 63 years is complete. The door awaits its keeper." Pact? Transition? My heart started hammering against my ribs. This felt wrong. Deeply, fundamentally wrong. These weren't Dad's friends. They looked like them, sounded mostly like them, but they were hollow, Copies. Or maybe they had always been something else, wearing human appearances like ill-fitting suits. Dad's hands trembled as he reached for the box. The lid wasn't hinged. It lifted straight off. Inside, nestled on dark velvet, wasn't a gift. It was a single large black candle, its wax strangely iridescent, shifting like oil on water. There was also a small, obsidian knife, sharp and wickedly curved. The blade seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "Dad, no," I pleaded, starting to stand up. Instantly, two of the other guests, men I vaguely recognized from Dad's bowling league, moved smoothly to flank me, their hands resting lightly on my shoulders. Their touch was cold and possibly strong, fingers too long and jointed in too many places. I couldn't move. Panic seized me. "It's all right, son," Dad said, his voice sounding distant, strained. "It's the only way to keep things balanced, to feed what waits below. It's been this way since your great-grandfather found the door in the woods in 1835, the one that should never have been opened." "Like Mom tried to close it?" I asked, sudden understanding dawning. "That's what happened to her, isn't it? She tried to break the pact." Dad's eyes flashed with grief. "No one breaks the pact. She thought she could substitute herself, offer herself instead of us. But they refused her. They've always wanted our bloodline, the marked ones." His voice dropped to a whisper. "They took her anyway, as punishment." Mr. Henderson produced a match, struck it against a box. The flame flared unnaturally bright in the dimming light filtering through the windows. I noticed with horror that outside, though it should have been early evening, the sky had gone completely black. Not the darkness of night, but a void starless and absolute. The match's flame cast no shadows, despite its brightness. He lit the black candle. It didn't smell like wax. It smelled like ozone, like damp earth, like something metallic and old. The flame wasn't yellow or orange. It burned with a deep, violet light that cast long, dancing shadows that moved against the direction of the flame's flicker. The shadows formed shapes on the wall, elongated figures with too many limbs, contorting in what might have been dance or agony. And I remembered something else, being 5 years old, waking from a nightmare where tall creatures with too many joints danced around my bed. Dad had come in, see my terror, and show me his palm. "We see them because of this," he'd said, pointing to his hourglass mark. "We're the only ones who can. That's our burden, our gift." "The offering," Mrs. Gable prompted, her stretched smile wider now, splitting her face unnaturally. As she spoke, I glimpsed something behind her teeth, a darkness, a void similar to the one that had replaced the sky. Dad picked up the obsidian knife. His knuckles were white. He looked down at his own hand, resting on the arm of the chair, at the hourglass birthmark that now pulsed an angry red. He took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and made a swift, shallow cut across his palm, directly through the mark. I tried to cry out, but the hand on my shoulder tightened, squeezing the air from my lungs. My own birthmark burned in sympathy, the pain spreading up my arm as if my veins were filling with acid. Dad didn't flinch, didn't make a sound. He held his bleeding hand over the candle's violet flame. As the first drop of blood hit the flame, it didn't sizzle. It flared, sending purple sparks into the air that hung suspended, forming momentary constellations of unknown meaning. And the guests, they changed. It wasn't instantaneous, more like a slow-motion distortion. Their faces seemed to lengthen, their eyes sinking into shadow, their mouths stretching into impossible, hungry grins filled with too many teeth. The familiar forms flickered, revealing something gaunt, elongated and wrong underneath. The air grew cold, carrying the scent of decay and something else, something like stagnant pond water and electricity and time itself gone stale. They weren't human. They had never been human. They began to hum, a low, guttural sound that vibrated in my bones. It wasn't music. It was resonance, ancient and terrifying. It was a sound I'd heard in nightmares all my life. The sound I think Mom must have heard the night she disappeared. The sound of something vast and patient, stirring beneath reality. As the humming intensified, I noticed something horrifying. The walls of the living room were becoming transparent, revealing not the expected wooden framework, but a vast, impossible space beyond. A landscape of twisted, impossible geometry, where massive, Shadowy forms moved with deliberate purpose around what looked like an enormous door, its surface carved with the same symbols as the wooden box. Through the transparent floor, I could see it wasn't dirt or foundation beneath us, but a chasm that stretched downward forever, pulsing with violet light. And Dad was changing too. The weariness fell away from him. His eyes, fixed on the violet flame, began to glow with the same unnatural light. His skin seemed to tighten over his bones, taking on a grayish, translucent quality. The lines on his face deepened, looking less like wrinkles and more like carved glyphs, forming patterns similar to those on the box. His joints began to shift, bones lengthening and realigning with sickening, wet cracks. He wasn't my dad anymore. He was becoming one of them. The vessel being prepared. The blood dripped steadily into the flame. Each drop met with a flare and an intensification of the humming. The figures around him swayed, their shadowy forms seeming to draw sustenance from the ritual, from my father's offering, from his transformation. I finally understood. This wasn't a birthday party. It was maintenance, a feeding, a renewal of whatever pact Dad had made or inherited or been forced into generations ago. These weren't his friends celebrating his life. They were something else, ensuring their connection, their hold, ensuring the cycle continued. The blood, that's why it had to be exactly 63 years, one drop for each year, sustaining whatever lay beyond that door until the keeper could be properly prepared. And as my birthmark burned hotter, I realized with sickening clarity that I was next. The lineage continues. The hunger must be fed. Something inside me rebelled. This wouldn't be my fate. I wouldn't become whatever Dad was becoming. Wouldn't feed whatever ancient thing lurked beneath our family legacy. I thought of Mom, who had tried to save us, who had given herself to protect me from this moment. Terror gave me a surge of adrenaline. I twisted violently, shoving backward against the unyielding grips. One hand slipped, just enough. I scrambled, falling over a footstool, kicking out blindly. I connected with something hard, a knee, and heard a sharp crack, followed by a hiss that didn't sound remotely human. The humming stopped. Every elongated head snapped toward me, their glowing eyes filled with cold, ancient malice. The illusion was gone completely now. They were monsters wearing the borrowed skins of my father's acquaintances, skin that now hung loose in places, revealing glimpses of something chitinous and segmented underneath. And the thing in the armchair, the thing that was no longer my father, slowly turned its head. Its eyes burned violet. A low growl rumbled in its chest. But I saw something flicker behind those inhuman eyes. A last remnant of my father, fighting to the surface one final time. "Run," it rasped, the voice gravelly layered, barely recognizable. "They don't want you yet, but they will. The door in the woods, find it. Close it. Your mother found a way in her journal under the floorboards in your old room." Its voice contorted into an inhuman shriek as the others turned toward it, their attention momentarily diverted from me. Mom's journal? She'd been trying to break the cycle all along. I didn't need telling twice. I crab-walked backward, scrambled to my feet, and bolted for the kitchen door. The cold hand snatched at me, ripping my sleeve. Something sharp, a claw, raked across my back. I screamed, but didn't stop moving. I slammed through the back door, into the suffocating darkness of the woods, not daring to look back. I ran until my lungs burned and tears streamed down my face. Strange whispers followed me through the trees, and more than once I glimpsed thin, impossibly tall figures moving parallel to my path, always just beyond the range of clear sight. The darkness wasn't natural. No stars, no moon, just absolute blackness, broken only by brief flashes of violet light that illuminated nothing. Then I saw it, a clearing I'd never noticed before, though I'd played in these woods all my childhood. In the center stood a massive ancient oak tree, its trunk split down the middle, creating a gap that looked almost like a doorway. Inside the gap was only darkness, but it wasn't empty. It moved, pulse-breathed. The air around it rippled like heat waves, and the smell of ozone was overwhelming. The door in the woods, what great-grandfather had found, what Mom had tried to close. As I approached, I could feel its pull A gravity that tugged not at my body, but at something deeper, something connected to the mark on my palm. The darkness inside the split trunk seemed to recognize me, to hunger for me specifically. It knew my bloodline. It knew the hourglass mark. It had been waiting. But before I could approach it further, a deafening chorus of those humming voices rose from behind me. I glanced back to see a procession of elongated figures emerging from the tree line, led by the thing that had been my father. They were coming for me, to complete what they'd started, to ensure the lineage continued. I didn't stop until I hit the main road, collapsing onto the asphalt, gasping for air. Above me, the sky was normal again. Dusky evening, stars just beginning to emerge. A car swerved to avoid me, horn blaring. Normal sounds, normal world. As if a membrane separated this reality from the nightmare I just escaped. I called the police from my cell. I told them. I don't even know what I told them. A home invasion? A psychotic break? They sent a cruiser to the house. They found it empty. No signs of a struggle, no blood, no black candle. Just leftover roast beef, a half-eaten Jell-O salad, and faded party lights buzzing on the porch. The officer gave me a concerned look as he described the scene, clearly thinking I was having some kind of breakdown. There was one weird thing, though, he admitted reluctantly. All the clocks in the house had stopped, every single one showing 6:13 p.m. The exact time Dad had cut his palm. Dad is missing. His friends are unreachable. Their numbers disconnected. Their homes standing empty, as if no one had lived there for years. The police think Dad wandered off, maybe had a health episode. They look at me with pity, thinking I'm hysterical from grief and stress. But I know what I saw. I know what they are. And I know that Dad didn't just wander off. He was renewed, prepared for another cycle, transformed into something that serves whatever waits behind that door in the woods. I haven't been back to the house. I can't, but I need to. Mom's journal is there, under the floorboards. The answer to breaking the cycle might be in those pages. The answer to saving Dad, if anything of him remains, and maybe even Mom. Sometimes late at night, I think I see movement in the woods behind my own apartment. Tall, thin shadows flickering between the trees. Watching, waiting, patient. I've started keeping track of how many I see each night. Always 63. Never more, never less. The hourglass birthmark on my palm has begun to darken. The edges growing more defined each day. Black veins spread from it now, reaching past my wrist. Sometimes I wake up with the taste of ozone in my mouth and dirt under my fingernails, though I haven't left my apartment. Last night, I found a small wooden box outside my door. I didn't open it. I've started researching my family history, looking for clues about this door in the woods Dad mentioned. The librarian gave me an odd look when I requested the county's oldest maps and land surveys. Funny, she said, your father used to research the same things. As she handed me the maps, I noticed something on her palm as her sleeve pulled back, the faintest outline of an hourglass. When she saw me looking, she quickly pulled her sleeve down, but not before I saw the black veins spreading up her arm. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. When's your birthday? She asked, her voice too light, too casual. I didn't answer. I just took the maps and left. But as I reached the library door, I heard her whisper, time is running out for all of us. Back in my apartment, I spread the maps across my kitchen table. The oldest one, dated 1835, showed something that made my blood run cold. The woods behind our house were marked with a symbol, a crude hourglass inside a circle, and scrawled in faded ink at the edge of the map. The confluence, the door, the bargain is made. The same year, my great-grandfather supposedly found the door. I don't know what the pact was. I don't know what happens when the cycle is complete. All I know is that my dad's birthday party didn't go as planned. Or maybe it went exactly as they planned all along. Whatever my father became, whatever door he opened or failed to close, I'm afraid the cycle isn't finished. I'm afraid it's just beginning again, with me.